Will they or won't they? And that is the multi-million dollar question that we are looking at right now, is will Floyd Mayweather square off in a boxing match with the UFC featherweight champion, the notorious one, Conor McGregor? That's a huge question right now. We're hearing reports it's not going to happen, reports that it is going to happen. Obviously, Dana White's going to say no, unless he can get his piece of the pie. Nonetheless, it's a very intriguing question, and certainly I look forward to seeing how it plays out. I don't know how Conor would fare in that fight, but I'd certainly tune in to watch it. Nonetheless, welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 88 event, which will take place on May 29th and feature 6 main card fights, which I'll be giving you breakdowns and predictions for in this episode of the show. All 6 preliminary bouts will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. We've got a heck of a run coming up as far as shows are concerned. We have a big UFC 199 taking place next with the newly minted main event, Luke Rockhold versus Michael Bisping. Looking forward to that, and then a couple shows in June, and an exceptionally busy July. This is the last event on this current subscription pack. Make sure you keep an eye out, because I think I'm going to try and offer a package where you can get into this one and get a discount on the next subscription pack before it actually kicks into play. So make sure you keep an eye there. I'm coming off a 6-5 event at UFC 198. Didn't have a great showing. I really felt like I got raw. I thought Corey Anderson won the Shogun fight, which really hurt, and that was unfortunate. And the thing that sucked for me is I had Stipe right down to the end, and I changed it for Fabricio Verdum in my final reviews of my predictions. So, I went with Fabricio, went with who I thought was going to win the fight. He didn't. He made some very poor fight choices and lost as a result. It hurt my pocketbooks because I had a massive bet going heading into that fight. Still available. They just needed Fabricio to win that matchup for me to cash huge. Nonetheless, we move forward, and that's why MMA is great. There's so much action. We have an opportunity to get right back on the winning track that we were experiencing not that long ago with 4 exceptionally strong showings in a row, including 3 double-digit win totals. And as one thing is concerned, I am going to predict the Tarec Saffiedine Rick Story fight on this podcast, even though the talk is that Tarec could be injured and could get the word here shortly that he has to pull out of the fight, depending on what the doctors say. If that is the case, I will give you my prediction for Story versus his replacement on the prelims, in the prelim section, or maybe it'll get pushed off to a future event. Nonetheless, let's get to that first main card prediction. We open things up in the UFC's lightweight division as the People's Warrior Josh Burkman, 29 wins, 12 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on the Irish Dragon Paul Felder with 11 wins and 2 defeats. Now, coming to this matchup, Burkman is coming off a successful 155-pound debut where he took on and defeated KJ Noons. He had gone winless in his 3 previous bouts. Felder had back-to-back losses, the first 2 losses of his career, including a split decision loss to Ross Pearson, before rallying to submit Darren Cruikshank in a fight that he was arguably behind in or was very close before he got the late win in the 3rd round. Physically, Felder 1 inch taller, Burkman will have a 2-inch reach advantage, and the Irish Dragon is 4 years younger than the People's Warrior. Looking at Felder first, he's a black belt in Taekwondo and Karate and a BJJ blue belt, so a very accredited fighter. 7 wins by knockout, 1 win by submission, and 3-2 on the scorecards. For Burkman, he comes from a very strong athletic background, has his own style of combat he likes to call, or discipline he likes to call, I think it's who hit you, or something like that. Check it out. 7 wins by knockout, 10 wins by submission. He's 11-4 on the scorecards, which are pretty solid number. The big number that stands out for Burkman, he has been defeated by submission on 7 occasions, and he has just 1 knockout loss, but it came recently at the hands of the heavy-hitting Canadian, Patrick Cote. Now, looking at Burkman, he's a very patient fighter, almost to a fault at times, and then he flips a switch and just goes for it, and he'll attack in these violent barrages. He likes to open with a lot of kicks, really open up, try and engage that distance. He throws a lot of kicks to the body and the obliques, and that's where he'll look to try and test the waters early. He has a very deep, good right hand, a sneaky left hook that he'll let go when he's under fire, kind of almost as a counter strike. When you look at that fight with KJ Noons, Noons landed almost next to nothing in that opening round and didn't do much, and it allowed Burkman to really get it going. When he did get knocked out by Patrick Cote, he got cracked with a massive right hand. He actually got hurt early in that matchup and eventually finished later in that fight with the same hand. And it took a lot to get him out of there. So that tells you how good his chin is. With Burkman, as far as his grappling is concerned, he's had mixed results with his takedowns. He has very good submissions, and he has that very good guillotine. We saw him put John Fish to sleep with it. He's got a number of wins by guillotine, and that's something, if a fighter looks for a takedown and shoots and is a little bit sloppy with their neck, he's going to attack with that. He did score a couple of takedowns with Nunes, and he had a nice trip takedown against Patrick Cote as well. Now you look at Paul Felder, he has had issues with pushing the pace. He uses way too much flash over function, and it simply is not effective enough. He will counter-strike, but again, as I said, he tends to sit back a little bit too much, and that's probably the reason he's 3-2 in decisions, and he's lost a couple close ones against veteran fighters. Against Ross Pearson, he was getting outworked, he was getting cracked with some big shots against Darren Cruikshank, and really not implementing his style. When he fought Ross Pearson, he was missing with a lot of his strikes, or he was getting started and countered with shots and then stopping his flow and having to reset. Now, his defensive wrestling is pretty decent, but we have seen him have some issues in the past. He was taken down by Jason Sago a number of times. Cruikshank took him down, Ross Pearson even took him down. I think they each took him down once. Against Cruikshank, he attempted a couple of takedown or submissions. Didn't have the best position. Ended up getting on the wrong side of the takedown and was put on his back. He did get the submission late in that third round, which was very effective. But I don't like his positional game. He tends to try and bully guys in the clinch, but he often loses position, gives up underhooks very easily. And this is an area I think Burkman can really capitalize on his positioning and get some dominant positions that will lead to some point scoring. Burkman did seem a little bit tired after the Nunes fight. I would expect he will, if he's going to get better fighting at 155 pounds and making that cut, he'll start to see it in this matchup, his second opportunity to go out there. Felder doesn't push a huge pace, though, so it's not like he's going to overwhelm him with volume. Look for Burkman to find success in the clinch and on the mat, score some takedowns. I think he'll be the busier striker, land some power, and my prediction is a bit of an upset here. I'm going to take Josh Burkman to upset Paul Felder. I'll take Burkman by decision, possibly a split. Fight number 2 in the main card, and this is a fantastic card, by the way. Do not sleep on this card. It's going to be an excellent card. Fight number 2 is also in the welterweight division. It's Jorge Gamebred Masvidal, 29 wins and 10 losses, takes on Lorenz, the Monsoon Larkin, 16-5-0 with 1 no contest, a pair of former Strikeforce competitors. And it's very interesting to note both these guys have previously fought in different weight classes. Larkin fought at 205. Moved to 185. Masvidal formerly fighting at 155, so they're coming together at 170 here. Now for Lorenz, he's coming off his first loss as a 170-pounder after back-to-back TKOs of pretty decent fighters. He lost a very close split decision to Albert Tumenov, who we just saw upset by Gunnar Nelson. You're welcome for that prediction. For Masvidal, he was successful in his welterweight debut, knocking out Cesar Ferreira, but lost a very close split decision to Benson Henderson 5-rounder. In his next outing. Physically, both guys are 5'11", but Masvidal, formerly fighting at lower weight classes, will have a 2-inch reach advantage. Lorenz Larkin is the younger man by 2 years. Now, looking at Jorge, he has 39 wins. 39 fights. That's a lot of experience. 11 wins by knockout, 2 submissions. He's 16-7 when going the distance. For Lorenz Larkin, he's a BJJ purple belt, comes from a kickboxing background, 10 wins by knockout. He is 6-4 on the scorecards. Now, so the statistics striking are very close. A slight edge to Masvidal in output, about half a strike per minute. Strikes absorbed, very close as well. Very minor difference. For Masvidal, he's more of a boxing-oriented fighter compared to Lorenz Larkin. He's a kickboxer. Even though Masvidal does have good, decent kicks, Lorenz Larkin certainly should have the advantage there. Now, you look at one thing with Masvidal, you see a lot of his fights, he tends to get rocked and clipped with some big shots. Now, at times he will rally, but we saw in the Havilov fight, it ultimately cost him a very close matchup. He got cracked in the third round, and that really turned that fight against him. But one thing he's very good at is making adjustments on the fly. This is not working. I'm going to go and do this and make that adjustment and have success. Against Benson Henderson, who's also very good at that, making adjustments, it didn't work out for him, even though it was a very close fight. Look for Masvidal to flash a left jab. He pops it out while moving backwards, very effective that way. Good short punches. He's an exceptionally talented pocket puncher, one of the best boxers in the division. And look for him to work the body and really rip those hooks in there and do some damage. He also has some more flashy, more high-end techniques. Jumping knee, he'll throw in there body kicks. He mixes everything up very well. He moves away under pressure exceptionally well. I really like the way I see that. He sees strikes coming, can anticipate his opponent's attacks, gets out of there to either lessen the impact or nullify it altogether. He has an exceptionally underrated ground game. Look for him to, switch things up, as I said. Look for his wrestling. He has pretty good submissions, even though the numbers don't suggest it. He has good takedowns, good top position. We see, for example, submitting Michael Chiesa in a fight where he was in a lot of trouble in early on. Now look at Lorenz Larkin. He is an exceptionally dangerous striker, and it has become magnified since cutting to welterweight. He has a very good left jab, right hook combination. He will throw a nice lead left hook as well. His kicking game, that push kick, he'll throw some very snappy, hard low kicks. We saw him cut down Santiago Ponzinibbio he busted up his lead leg, did the same thing against Albert Tumenov, and really can take away his opponent's base if he focuses there. He does a lot of jumping into his strikes, a lot of speed, a lot of fluidity, throws that big right hook, relies on his speed to close that distance and really catch guys off guard. Against Santiago, he was overwhelming him and eventually knocked him out, just kept landing big shots. But prior to the knockout, he did get himself in trouble, and we have seen some issues there. Against Tumenov, he was getting backed up by Tumenov along the cage. As I said, Santiago rocked him a couple times. Costa Philippou knocked him out again, got him on the cage, let his hands go, and hurt him big time. And, once Lorenz gets in that position, he's got nowhere to move, nowhere to adjust when the strikes are coming in, and that makes him much more vulnerable. Larkin tends to be a little bit of a linear fighter. He's a kickboxer. You're not going to see him shoot for a lot of takedowns where it's not an abnormality. It wouldn't be out of the question for him, but his focus is kickboxing. He's going to look to strike with Masvidal. For Masvidal, he does an exceptionally good job of mixing up his offense, striking and wrestling back and forth. Lorenz Larkin's last 3 opponents, not known for the wrestling. John Howard, those last 3 guys, had the most takedowns at 2.7 and 49% completion rate. So that tells me he knew his opponents were going to strike with him, and that certainly is to his advantage. Masvidal should be able to keep him guessing, even though Lorenz has good takedown defense. Force him to work, force him to defend, force him to have a multi-level defensive front that he has to focus on. Look for Jorge to feint his way into range, stay in the pocket, and land strikes. Avoid Larkin's offense, really stay inside that kicking range. I think he can hurt him. I think he certainly has power. I think he'll land some takedowns as well, mix him in, especially as the fight goes on and maybe Lorenz slows down a little bit. But again, I don't like the way Lorenz reacts when he gets hurt. Certainly, he's not chinny where it's one shot and he's going down, but it certainly can take some edge off him. And my prediction is Jorge Masvidal on another upset to defeat Lorenz Larkin by decision. Moving right along, we bump up 15 pounds to the UFC's middleweight division as Chris Camozzi, 23-10-0, takes on Vitor Lex Luthor Miranda of Brazil, the current record of 13 wins and 4 losses. This has the potential to be another very strong fight, even though for the rankings, really not that big of a deal. Camozzi, he is very streaky and has been very streaky in the UFC. He had back-to-back wins, followed by a 5-fight losing streak spread out over 2 terms, and then a 4-fight winning streak. He can pair things together and kind of get things going, and he's a very streaky fighter. For Miranda, and of course it always depends on the competition and when he's not facing Jacare Souza. For Miranda, he coming off 3 consecutive wins. He has just 1 loss in his last 8 fights, which I believe took place at heavyweight in the finals of The Ultimate Fighter. He has stopped all 7 wins during this 8-fight stretch, including 5 by knockout. Physically, Camozzi 1 inch taller, Miranda 1 inch reach advantage, and the American will have is 7 years younger. Now Miranda is a BJJ brown belt, green belt in judo, and a black belt in Muay Thai, which is his forte. He has 9 wins by knockout. He is 2-1 in submissions, 1-3 on the scorecards, which is a little bit concerning. He has 8 first-round finishes. For Chris Camozzi, BJJ brown belt, 7 wins by knockout, 7-5 in fights ended by submission, so a lot of submission losses, but that won't be an issue against Miranda, I wouldn't think. He's 9-5 on the scorecards. He has never been knocked out. He is one tough SOB. He's exceptionally durable, keeps moving forward and attacking, which really can wreak havoc on his opponent when you can't hurt a guy and he just keeps attacking. 4.11 strikes landed per minute, but he's still pretty hittable, giving up about 3.15 strikes absorbed per minute. So positive, just about a positive 1 striking exchange number there. So Camozzi does a nice job of working and landing his strikes, but will take some damage in the process. He's not overly fleet of foot, not a fast guy. He will slow down. He tends to plod forward though, and as he slows down, he tends to have a little bit of trouble, distancing himself from his opponent with his strikes and showing that he can be overwhelming against a fighter who's not going to be, deterred by his constant forward pressure. Takedowns have played a role in his issues with decisions and losing close decisions, giving up some takedowns. As far as his offense is concerned, he throws nice spearing right jab, straight right as well, right hook. A lot of his offense comes off his right side, some decent low kicks, a lot of single strikes. He will step into his strikes, but again, it's something if his opponent can anticipate it and see it coming, they can avoid it. He will attack and move forward behind his offense, and he has no problem standing and trading. Again, that comes down to that durability. He will use the clinch position as well, try and grind his opponent down, knees, short punches. Didn't do a great job, though, when he fought Tom Kong Watson of keeping him on the mat when he did look for takedowns. And Watson is a guy that's been susceptible to being put on his back. And, that was one of those fights he slowed down. That could have had something to do with the constant low blows that the Brit kept landing. Now, for Miranda, he is a very strong kickboxer with big-time power that he was knocking heavyweights out with, and was converted very well back to middleweight, where he's much more suited. He has found success, and one of the things he's done is defending takedowns for fighters who want to try and take him down, and turning that position into his favor and landing some very vicious ground and pound, really letting his hands go on the mat and doing damage and finishing fights there. He's very good in a scramble, gets his base away and gets back up to a superior position. really does a nice job of holding his opponent's head down and letting his hands go from that position. Strikes in transition, strikes into those tight spaces where, a fighter's trying to protect. We saw in the last match, he landed some good elbows leading to the finish of Guimaraes. Throws a nice left jab, works in a right uppercut as well. Will dig to the body with very hard shots. Throws, a lot of combinations that include kicks, and he has a beautiful right head kick that stopped both Guimaraes and Jake Collier in 2 of his victories. So if he can let that go, Camozzi's perfect knockout record might change as well. Miranda moves very well, which helps to keep him fresh. He not a lot of wasted movement. He's very relaxed in there, avoids damage, calm under pressure. He has had issues at times creating separation. That's something Camozzi needs to exploit in this fight. Get a hold of him, grind him into that cage, and hold on to him. Overall, though, Miranda is the better striker, and Camozzi's going to be there to hit, which is not good for him against a guy of Miranda's caliber, and his willingness to trade in this fight is not going to be his favor. Camozzi lacks a strong wrestling game, and if he tries to take Miranda down, as I said, Vitor is exceptionally good at turning those positions into his favor. I think Miranda boxes him up at range, fends off the clinch and takedown attempts, eventually lands something big like a right high kick we've seen him go to, and my prediction is Vitor Miranda to defeat Chris Camozzi. I'll take Miranda by TKO. Up next, we've got the fight that may or may not happen, or may happen at another time down the road. Former Strikeforce welterweight champion, number 10th ranked Tarec, the Sponge Saffiedine of Belgium, 16 wins and 4 losses, takes in the 11th ranked Rick the Horror Story with 18 wins and 8 defeats. It's a big fight for both men, looking to build some momentum. They're coming off decent performances. Saffiedine just fought after a 15-month layoff, so he fought his last matchup, which was preceded by a 15-month layoff. For Story, he's actually returning to action after a 15-month layoff, so he's been out of action for quite a while, coming off that Gunnar Nelson victory. Tarec, 1 inch taller. Story will have a 1 inch reach advantage, and the former Strikeforce champ is 2 years younger. Saffiedine, BJJ black belt, also black belts in karate and judo, and he comes from a taekwondo background as well. Sorry, judo and taekwondo backgrounds. He's not a judo black belt. 1 win by knockout, though, for a striking-based fighter. That's exceptionally low. 5 submission victories, 10-3 in the scorecards. He has 1 loss by knockout coming against Rory McDonald. 8 of his last 9 fights have gone the distance. For Story, comes from a collegiate wrestling background. 4 wins by knockout, 4-1 in fights ended by submission, and 10-7, I believe I'm reading that right, in fights ending on the scorecard. So there's a very good chance this fight goes the distance, potentially. Statistically, Saffiedine a very slight edge, 0.4 strikes landed per minute in favor of him, but Story, 0.82 strikes absorbed less than Saffiedine, so it's kind of a wash in statistics. The big numbers that you look out here, though, 2.72 takedowns at a 54% completion rate for Story, compared to Saffiedine's 86% takedown defense. So Story lands a decent takedowns, decent number of takedowns, a decent completion rate, and Saffiedine defends takedowns very well. So this could be a very tightly contested fight. For Tarec, he's stopped 6 of his last 7 attempts that were thrown his way in the combined fights against Jake Ellenberger and Rory McDonald. For Rick Story, though, 5-1 in his last 6 fights where he lands at least 1 takedown. And the loss in that span was a very controversial loss to Mike Pyle that I felt he won and was very close to winning with via stoppage. For Saffiedine, he's a switch stance fighter, very calculated, picks his spots very well. He will attack with his left hand. He'll throw a left hand jab hook combination, which catches guys off guard because they're not expecting to see consecutive strikes coming from the same side. He has very hard low kicks, which he showed in the Nate Marquardt fight. He also did very well taking a Gung Hu Lim with his low kicks as well, chopping him down. Back leg high kick, something he throws with minimal wind-up, very effective. He'll go to that a lot. Whether it hits the head or not, if it bounces off his opponent's shoulder or arm, it certainly can do damage. In the tie clinch, he'll use it to jam up his opponent. As they come forward, he'll land knees and elbows from that position. What we have seen from Saffiedine, though, he has struggled with power punchers. Jake Ellenberger was landing some hard combinations as he moved in, and Saffiedine was putting his back on the cage and allowing Ellenberger to tee off, and he was actually rocked with a right hand off the break and was in a lot of trouble. I think it was late in the opening round of that matchup, and that's something we'll have to watch for here. He will look for the odd takedown, not a big part of his game. Good takedown defense and strong balance, more of the focal point of his counter wrestling. When you look at Rick Story, he will wrestle. He had a nice shot versus Leandro Moffer to put him on his back. He really powered through and drove him to the mat. Again, he's not a high-volume takedown man, 2.72 as I mentioned before, but once he gets to the mat, he looks to do damage. Big ground and pound, top position submissions are always an option as well, and he will go to work once he gets you on the mat. Story, though, on the feet does his best work when he is working you along the cage. Targets the body with strikes, really lets his hands go, and rips with a lot of power. He has a strong left hand. He has a nice right hook, which he'll double up, kind of half power, and then boom, he'll throw a full strength one at you and try and catch you off guard. He dropped Gunnar Nelson with a big left hook, hurt Gastelum as well with a left hand strike, and those are things he's going to have to do against Saffiedine, get on the inside and let his hands go. He has some good timing on his leg kicks, take out his opponent's base, and he'll chop away as well, even though I favor Tarec's leg kicks over Rick Story's. Story is certainly not totally outgunned in that scenario. His cardio has been a bit of a question mark at times. Again, that pile fight, his cardio cost him a little bit there. He slowed down and let him back into that matchup in a fight he had dominated. And certainly with the layoff, you question, is that going to be an issue here? For Saffiedine, to me, he didn't look that good against Jake Ellenberger. Ellenberger is a shell of his former self, and I don't think Tarec looked that good against him. He benefited from the lack of activity that Jake was throwing at him, and Ellenberger was throwing a lot of strikes that weren't connecting. Story thrives in fights where he can push his opponent backwards and unload, and he should be able to do that against Saffiedine. And even if he can't take him down, look for those takedowns, use them as distractions, mix up his offense, and suddenly you're landing strikes when he thinks you're going to shoot for a takedown. Saffiedine does not deal well with power. I've talked about this in several of his fights before. Jake hurt him, Rory stopped him, Lim hurt him as well. Even going back to his Strikeforce days, Tyler Stinson bloodied him up a couple times, had him in a little bit of trouble. Saffiedine's a very technically sound fighter, but if you can turn it into a dogfight and really put some hands on him, it can change the complexion of a fight very quickly. I like the way Rick Story pushes the pace. I look for him to get on the inside of the kicking range, throw volume, power, keep pushing when Saffiedine is backing up, and I think he's actually going to catch him, and my prediction is Rick Story to defeat Tarec Saffiedine. I'm going to take Story by TKO. Another upset. Look at that. Co-main event time, and we have the former UFC Bantamweight champion, Renan Barao, the Baron, as he's affectionately called by his fans, 35 wins, 3 losses, and 1 no contest, moving up to featherweight to take on the 9th-ranked Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens, 24 wins and 12 defeats. Now, as I said, this is the return to 145 pounds for Barao. I don't think he ever fought in the UFC at 145 pounds. He's predominantly fought over the last number of years at 135 pounds. He's coming off the rematch title fight loss against TJ Dillashaw, which certainly can hurt a fighter's psyche, but moving up a division gives him something different to look forward to. 10-month layoff, so he's definitely had some time to probably put on that weight properly, and as I said, he's looking to rebuild himself in a new division. For Stevens, he's coming off a tough loss to Max Holloway. He has just one victory in his last 4, and it was against Dennis Bermudez in a fight that I picked him to pull off the upset, and he landed a beautiful knockout, but to me, he was losing that matchup before he scored the stoppage. So he could easily be on a 4-fight losing streak, which is definitely disappointing. Interesting, again, we have 2 weight classes coming together, a former lightweight and Stevens taking on a former bantamweight in Barao. But Stevens just 2 inches taller, he'll have a 1-inch reach advantage, and he's the older man by 1 year. Now for the Brazilian, he's a black belt in BJJ, 8 wins by knockout, 15-0 in fights ended by submission, 10-1 on the scorecards, and he has 2 losses by knockout, both coming to TJ Dillashaw. For Little Heathen, BJJ black belt, 16-1 in fights ended by knockout, losing to Eve Edwards by knockout. That's also a fight I predicted an upset in. Gosh, I'm awesome. Depends on what night. 3-3 in fights ended by submission, 5-8 on the scorecards. 5-8 for a long-time UFC veteran. That's not a good record on the scorecards. So overall, if you do the math quickly, he is 8-11 in fights where he cannot knock his opponent out. 8-12 if you want to count the Eve Edwards loss, but still 8-11. You get the point. He's a knockout guy who needs that to rely on. And he relies on that heavily to get the majority of his wins. So big questions here. How does Barao fare not having to cut to 135 pounds? He should have a speed advantage. Is his cardio going to be back? Is the power that he's used before and his ability to wrestle guys and his strength, how will that translate against heavier opponents? And has cutting to 135 pounds so frequently been an issue, created an issue for his body moving up? We look at Jeremy Stevens, he throws absolute nuclear power. And he has more than just power in his hands. He knocked out Honey Jason with a head kick, stopped Bermudez aforementionedly with that jumping knee. He has that bomb of a right hand, though, and that's his primary weapon. He will use it to counter as well, catch his opponent coming forward. It's a nice counter to leg kicks and body kicks that his opponents will throw. He has some decent kicks of his own. He needs to vary his attack. And if I can get a hold of Jeremy Stevens, I say mix things up. You've got to do more than just look for the knockout. The power that he possesses is both a weapon and a curse. It can end a fight with one punch, or he can spend the entire fight chasing the knockout and simply get outclassed and lose a decision, or get counter-struck and knocked out like Edwards did to him. He's at his best, I said, when he can vary his attack. He has a tendency to, get outclassed by more technically sound strikers, guys who can keep him guessing, throw a lot of feints at him, and he will have trouble getting his offense off, starting combinations and pausing and just not letting his hands go. He may look to incorporate his wrestling in this matchup. 97% takedown defense for Renan Barao. So that's going to be difficult for him to get involved. And he has a pretty good submission game. So if Stephens does go to the mat, he has to be mindful of that. Barao's also capable of scoring his own takedowns. He's had 2 against Mitch Gagnon, 4 against McDonald. He has a good submission game. How will he fare against bigger men? I still think he could put Jeremy Stephens on his butt. He won't have the length advantage he's normally used to at 135 pounds, but I think the speed and his improved cardio from not having to cut so much should play a role here in this fight. Look for Barao to be the more varied striker, mix up his kicks, throw his hands with his boxing, really let things go, keep moving, work that jab, really throw Jeremy Stephens off. Stephens tries to stay technical early, but eventually he'll go looking for the knockout and lose that technical edge and lose that precision to his striking and that varied attack and simply get picked apart. And my prediction is Renan Barao to defeat Jeremy Stephens by decision. We move now to the main event of the evening. We have an absolute crackerjack of a matchup as the 7th-ranked Thomas Almeida, undefeated at 21-0, takes on fellow undefeated fighter 8-0, no love, Cody Garbrandt. And this is a matchup that's very, very exciting. A possible preview of a future title fight where they could meet down the road. And when you look at 135 pounds, it is getting really exciting. We just talked about Barao. He's not in the division anymore. We got John Dodson, John Lineker, Aljamain Sterling, who's also on this card, and it's a travesty. I know what the UFC is trying to do, but he shouldn't be on the prelims. Plus, you've got these 2 guys. You've got Mayday McDonald back in action. Mighty Mouse, considering, possibly moving up to 135 pounds. This division is cracking. And you've got Uriah Faber still at the top, about to get his head caved in by Dominic Cruz, or at least outclassed badly. For Almeida, he is 4-0 in the UFC. 3 straight finishes. He took out a very savvy veteran, Brad Pickett. Also took out Yves Jabouet. Pickett easily his toughest test. For Garbrandt, 3-0 in the UFC. He's faced a little bit of lower level competition. His opponents 5-6. His 3 opponents are 5-6 inside the octagon, with most of those wins and losses coming with Marcus Brimage. For Almeida, his competition, the 4 fighters he's faced, 11-15 overall, so a lot more fights as far as who Almeida has faced. Now, the Brazilian BJJ brown belt, Muay Thai black belt, 16 wins by knockout. The guy's an absolute monster. 3 submission victories, 2 decision wins. He has 16 first-round finishes. He does not take long to put his opponents away. For Cody Garbrandt, comes from an amateur boxing background and wrestling background. 7 wins by knockout, 1 decision, 2, which came in his second last fight. So he not used to putting guys away with his hands. Was forced to go the distance against Henry Baronis in a tough fight where he hurt Baronis a couple of times. Now, Garbrandt 1 inch taller. Almeida will have a sizable 5-inch reach advantage, which should play a factor in this fight. Both men are very young at 24 years of age. Big experience advantage for Almeida. Overall, 21 pro bouts to just 8. Garbrandt has talked about his padded record. He's fighting cab drivers in the media, which I found very entertaining. For Almeida, he's an absolute lethal striker. Calculated, covers up well, looks for openings. He can be a counter striker. He can do it all. I like the way he starts low, almost takes a page out of Brad Pickett's book. Starts low, rises up, looking for a left hook. Good combinations, hard leg kicks, works his elbows, works his knee. A very effective Muay Thai striker. He decimated Yves Jabouet with a nice series of combinations to put him down. Dropped Brad Pickett with a step-in elbow early in that fight and finished him with that jumping knee. He had to dig deep in that fight against Pickett where he was hurt. He was standing in front of him. He got cracked with a big left hook, traded in the pocket with Pickett. He was dropped a couple of times early, so that left hook got through. He uses a lot of knees in close, though. He got his nose broke. It was a learning scenario for him where he was drawn into a brawl instead of remaining technical, and he came out with a victory, but still, it's a type of fight against a tough veteran that he probably should have learned a lot from. He's very effective with his lateral movement. Circles out, nice counter strikes against Anthony Burchak. He hurt him as Burchak was coming forward, and Almeida was able to move backwards and catch him. He'll work elbows in close, shoots the straight. I love his straight right hand. He will shoot it over the top of his opponent's strikes and can do a lot of damage, and that's where that 5-inch reach advantage should come into play. It's got power, it's got speed, it's got accuracy. He really snakes it through. If the fight does hit the mat, and fighters have tried to take him down before, he immediately starts looking for leg locks or other submissions. Not so much to catch them. Certainly, if he can, he will, to get them uncomfortable and create a scramble where he can get back to his feet. He showed good single leg defense against Anthony Burchak, and overall he's very strong in the clinch and was turning some positions into advantageous situations for him once his opponent shot. Now, Cody Garbrandt, very quick hands. Does a nice job of moving his head off center when he strikes. Good combination, solid left hand, throws nice left jabs as well. Short counter hooks if his opponent comes in and looks for a strike. He'll boom, boom, look for those counter hooks. He will, doesn't have, the greatest kicking game. It can still be effective. He will go high with it. But his boxing is his primary weapon. When he took out Marcus Brimage, he landed a beautiful counter uppercut as he came in, hurt him with a right hook counter as well, and eventually, and against Henry Broner, same thing, right uppercut to put him down. It didn't finish him, but certainly hurt him. Couple of holes I don't like to see in the American striking game. He tends to drop his hands. Marcus Brimage landed some decent shots against him, getting some big strikes through. He was getting hit with the left hand of Baronis a couple of times, and Henry Baronis, they're solid veteran guys, Henry Baronis, but not a world-class striker. And if he can get those strikes through, look out for what Almeida can do. Garbrandt also has a tendency to reach with his strikes, and coming forward with hooks, it leaves you open right down the middle of your guard to get crack with counter strikes. Overextends a bit, and his chin is up and out, and that's a target that a good striker is going to be able to capitalize on. As he's swinging, as he's coming forward, he's very vulnerable. Now, in this fight, I certainly could see him looking for takedowns to try and mix things up. He has countered aggression with takedowns against fighters who have tried to come forward, but again, Almeida very crafty on the mat. The way I look at it here, Almeida has more weapons than Garbrandt as far as striking is concerned. Now, Pickett did hurt him in the pocket with boxing, and that's what Garbrandt's going to look to do. But I think Cody is simply too loose defensively. I think Cody's going to have trouble closing the distance against Almeida, both based on the reach, Almeida using his kicks and his lateral movement and his counter strikes to really create separation and distance. I think we're going to see Cody eventually start to reach, and he's going to get cracked with that long right hand, either a counter or just an initial strike. And my prediction is Thomas Almeida to defeat Cody Garbrandt by knockout in a fantastic fight. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 88. We have a ton of action coming up on the horizon. May kind of slowed down, June picks up, and then boom, we are into July, and it's going to be insane. I will do my best to cover everything. Certainly considering buying the backpacks. And again, for those people who jumped in one and were disappointed with UFC 198, you go back, you look at the track record in the shows before. It's those people that stick around for large chunks of shows. And I'm not just saying that to say, I want you to spend of course I want you to spend your money on my bet pack and not buy other people's information. But the thing is, it's not a sprint. It is a long distance run. You stick it out, you will make money working with me. That's all. It's not a guarantee, but I promise you to do my best. That's all I can do. Thank you as always for following me and listening to my shows. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook as well. You can follow us, search out Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. And I will see you back here, guys, after the bell. Good luck. Enjoy the fights.